Hi, I'm Nikki Haverstock, and I'm wearing a hat because our septic system was out all weekend. So I got a shower, but I did not wash my hair. Today we're going to talk about writing shorter, so short stories, perhaps novellas, and it's just kind of general advice that you can use when you're looking how to tighten up your work or shorten your work. First off, why would you want to write short? Now, several authors have kind of been famous authors have kind of been in trouble for saying you should write a short story a day for a year before you start writing or something along that advice. Now, I'm not saying that you need to do that, but I will say there's a lot you can learn, especially when you are first starting to write fiction. If you're like me and you have no background, you've read a ton, but you haven't written a ton, the nice thing about a short story or novella is that you get to go through the whole process and learn a ton without necessarily wasting your time. And I'm putting that in quotes because no time is really wasted if you're learning. But I know when I wrote a 50,000 word book using kind of the nano limits. And when I got to the end, I realized I didn't want to write this book. It's in this back there somewhere on my computer. I could have revised it, but I realized this was not the story that I wanted to spend months and months and months revising. I tried. But when it came down to it and people were like, okay, yeah, you can totally do it, but you have to rewrite it. I was like, I do not want to rewrite this. So I wish I had started with a shorter story where I could have gone through that whole process and rewritten and all that and have taken significantly less time. My first series is actually a novella series. You can go down to the comments. It's Death on the Range. It's about 30,000. And a friend had recommended it to me and said, why don't you do a novella series? As a self-published author, you can. There is a market for them. People sometimes are attracted to shorter works by new to them authors. And it was great because in a year I was able to write 6 of them. Or I think 5 in the start of a different series. But I learned a ton. I grew so much, and I knew people who were writing their opus, their magnum opus, the book of their heart, and they're still working on it 5 years later because it's just, there's so much you have to learn. You have to keep rewriting as you learn. Whereas I picked a story that I love. I love this series, but it's not the end-all be-all of my life. So there's a benefit to that because you can go ahead and you can write in a series. You can start a series. I sell that series. It's made me money, and at the same time that you're learning. Another reason, and so if you're traditionally published, there might not be a market for novellas, but as a self-published author, there is. And same with short stories. So a lot of people do anthologies where a bunch of authors get together, hopefully with a really tight idea, all in the same genre, and they submit short stories. It can vary. Most of mine are between 10 and 15. Some people go a little higher, some people go a little lower. And the benefit is you can get together with other authors in your genre. You put out this anthology. Hopefully the goal is their readers read your story, your readers read their story, and everybody gets new fans. So that is the goal. I've done one several times for Halloween with the Paranormal Cozy authors, and I have a link down there to the story that I put in there. I believe the first one is The Case of the Murdered Moose. I think it is. I sell it for 99 cents on Amazon. But that story, though, that anthology made me money as well. And that short story is now something I can do something with. We'll see what I do with it in the future. Right now I'm selling it. I could package it up into a collection of short stories at some time, whatever. So an anthology, another thing that people use short stories for are reader magnets. And the idea is at the end of your book you say, hey, if you join my newsletter you can get a free copy of this short story that tells, and it can be one event. And so we're going to go ahead and jump into how to write a short story. So if you have an existing series already, you can do a short story with maybe an event that doesn't appear in the book. So I know that a lot of romance authors will do like a wedding story. So people have followed Jim and June on this beautiful romance, and at the end they get engaged, and everyone is going, oh, I want to hear about the wedding, or I want to hear about their first child, or well, whatever. You can do a short story that does an event that has not happened. And this is not just romance. It could be any story. It could be a weekend trip that went wrong in a mystery series. It can be in a fantasy story, a battle that you heard about but didn't see. just anything. So picking a plot, you can go ahead and do it. It still needs to have a plot. It can't just be a wedding. Unless your fans are just voraciously, all they care about is the wedding, then you can just do a wedding. But all of my short stories have had, I write mystery, so they've all been a mystery. Sorry, grabbing my notes. So there's a lot of ways that you can start with a short story. So one of my favorite ways, and I do all of these, which is you limit the characters, the locations, and the time period. I do all three. So my mysteries tend to be closed door mystery, meaning that right from the beginning we know the suspects list. I had one in a house, I had one in a casino, an abandoned casino. And in both cases I had people either identified by color or animal, so they were in like animal onesies. That was just a way that as a reader I have a hard time remembering names, and I barely have a chance to get to know these people before you're wrapping it up. So about 10,000 words, just so you know, in an audio book is about an hour. So that's reading the book out loud is about an hour. So, you know, at a slow speed, I listen it 2 times, so that's 30 minutes. Reading it, it might even be like 20 minutes, even less than that. So it's a very short time. But every single time you add a character, you have to introduce them and give enough information for the reader to remember them. That adds to your word count. Every time you add a new location, that adds to the word count. Time adds to your word count. So I like to think of them as being, just you limit all those things. My novella series is the same way. They happen at a closed event in general. I had one that was much longer. It was at a more open event. And I don't do that as much anymore because it's just a lot easier to start with. You're at a tournament. Someone's found dead. Has to be someone at this tournament. So that is a way to go. I have a friend who wrote a romance story, and it happened at an airport. These people are flirting, the airport gets shut down overnight because of weather, so they decide, hey, why not, let's go. And, sorry, I'm staring at my thing. Oh, I'm going to run out of battery. Well, hopefully it keeps recording. They only have overnight to get to know each other. Instantly, a lot of like snowed in cabins. Yeah, these can be whole books, but have you ever like had an idea where you're like, I have a great beginning scene and setup, a couple of clues, and I have a great ending scene? There you go, you got a short story. So just put all the meat in there. You're gonna have to limit the characters every time you introduce a character. You have to limit subplots. That's another one. So this is actually great if you want to do a novella series, because your subplots, instead of having your subplot start and end in the same episode, go ahead and spread it out over 3 novellas. So maybe she's flirting with a guy in book 2, in 1, and then in 2 they kiss, and then book 3 they decide to start dating. And then each book has an encapsulated mystery or war or battle or something like that. So another way to do it is to lower the stakes. I was talking to someone recently who writes mysteries, and instead of doing a murder, which I always do in my short stories, she lowers the stakes, something stolen. And so it helps things move faster, because in a murder there's a certain amount of like shock and dismay, and to deal with it you might feel that you need to go slower. So a lot of these points are going to depend on the kind of writer you are. But consider eliminating the character unless you absolutely need it. Consider sticking it in one room or one location. You know, you don't really get sidekicks unless they're, you know, kind of easy to write. And then the last tip, because my meter is, you know, flashing at me telling me that I have 2 minutes left before I run out of data space, is that if none of those resonate with you, then maybe you need to go a totally different approach, which is fine. Neil Gaiman has a masterclass. I reviewed masterclass somewhere else on the channel. You can watch his. He talks about a short story as being the last chapter in a book you didn't have to write. I think it's a great idea. I've never written a short story with that framework, but it would be great. And another suggestion is Joyce Carol Oates, I think is her name, also has a master class, and she does short stories. And then go read some short stories. So my battery's about to give out, so I hope that is some useful advice. If you have follow-up questions or you want me to do a second video on this topic, just let me know. Okay, bye.